Mama always said breakfast was the most important meal of the day. Even when she got sick, she made sure we had a good breakfast and something different every day. We'd wake up on weekends to the smell of bacon or maybe sweet rolls in the oven. Even during the week, Mama always made sure we at least had a bowl of cereal or oatmeal before school. We always had 4 to 5 kinds of cereal, so we could always have variation. Mama loved breakfast. Today I poured me and Joel some Cheerios in our bowls. We had that yesterday, and I wanted oatmeal or eggs, but we were out. We were out of almost everything, except a couple cans of soup and a couple boxes of cereal. We had cereal all day yesterday, because the only soup left was split pea and some tomato, which we both hated. After we ate, it was Joel's turn for the dishes. We went to bed so early yesterday that we slept a long time, and it was still dark this morning. We tried to watch TV, but even though the power was on today, all that was on every channel was the repeating warning about staying inside and avoiding other people so you didn't get infected. Sometimes that doctor guy would come on and explain that it was a virus and there was no medicine for it yet, but they were working on it. Dad said he would be back early morning today with more food and some tools for digging. I double-checked and made sure he had circled today, Tuesday, on the calendar. I had crossed out Sunday, the night he left, and Monday, yesterday, before I went to bed, to make sure I wouldn't forget. We had to get Mama in the ground today. The basement was starting to smell. So me and Joel went out to see what we could find as soon as it started getting light. Dad said it was okay to borrow stuff now from people because if they were too sick to try to stop us, they weren't going to need the stuff anyway. We went down to Mr. King's house by the state road. Him and his wife would always let us have eggs from his chickens, and sometimes me or Dad would mow his lawn. I figured he wouldn't mind taking a few eggs now, especially, and maybe even some of the corn he grew. Mr. King's yard was quiet. We couldn't even hear the chickens, but we could see him walking back and forth with a bucket to the hen house. He didn't look so good, was walking real slow, and he was all dirty. He didn't even look up at us when we walked up. He was making the same pattern over and over. He would start from his favorite perch on the top stair of his porch, legs dangling down the stairs. After a few seconds, he would stand up, walk to the house and fill the bucket, walk to the coop and dump the bucket into the trough, walk back and put the bucket back, and then sit back down on the step. By the time we got close, we saw him do it 6 or 7 times. He must have been doing it for a while because the whole area was thick with mud. His dog Ty was drinking out of the trough and he looked full and healthy. Told Joel I guess I knew where the chickens went. Up close I could see he was sick like Mom had been. Thin, because he had forgotten to eat. Tired like Mom because he started doing something and never remembered to stop. He wouldn't stop until he died now. I looked at Joel and he was staring at Mrs. King on her porch. She had half fallen out of her chair. Looks like she was knitting a blanket when she started forgetting. Part of her arm was red and bloody. Joel threw up and said it wasn't the chickens keeping the dog fat. I yelled at Mr. King to stop and help his wife. He didn't look up at me. Ty growled, though. Ty never growled at people. Mr. King said strangers could come in and steal the TV, and Ty would be happy to see them and sad to see them leave. Joel and I decided to go. Around the corner on the state road, there were a couple more houses. Our little road was all gravel and kind of hard to see if you didn't know it was there, so people usually left us alone. On the big road, though, you could see all the houses were standing open. Dad said people had looted even all the way out here because they panicked when the president came on TV the 3rd time. The first time the president came on, he said the virus was kind of like that old-timer's disease, where you would start to forget things, and then when it got worse, you would only want to do one thing. He said scientists didn't know where it started, but were working on a cure. The second time he came on, he said that it was important to keep calm and to try to limit contact with other people so it didn't spread. That's when the news started showing the first riots and stuff. The last time he came on, he said something about America being great, that scientists were still working on it, and God having mercy on our souls. Then they stopped showing anything on TV except the warnings. The big house closest to the corner was where the richest family in town lived. They had to be rich, because they had 3 cars that all worked just fine, and they owned the gas station, and were the only people that really owned anything in town besides their own house. They were the first to leave in their big truck when the president made his announcement. The dad stopped by all the houses and told everyone if they were smart, they would go too. They had twins in the grade behind me, so I was kinda sad to see them go, and hoped they would be back. Now, I didn't think they would. They had just left everything and gone. Dad had stopped there to borrow one of their cars when he left for tools and food, because our car didn't work most of the time anyway. They still had a car left in the driveway. Joel said we should borrow it and try to drive to Uncle Gary's. I told him I'm 11 and he's younger than me and we can't drive anyway except in video games. He said it would be like a video game, and if we crashed a little, no one would care, and there was no one out on the roads now anyway. But he didn't want to go in the house and try to find the keys though. Their house looked big and empty and just wrong. I wasn't going in there. Maybe tomorrow though, if Dad wasn't back, we would have to. The only store in town was the gas station, and we knew from looking the day Dad left that nothing was in there. Looters had taken all the pop and canned goods. Some genius even left the fridge open so the milk and stuff was all way beyond bad. The couple cans of soup we did have at home were scrounged from the back in some otherwise empty boxes. Split pea and tomato were starting to not sound so bad after all. I wondered what they would taste like mixed together. We tried the phone behind the counter again. There was still a dial tone, but no matter what number we called, no one ever answered. We tried Uncle Gary and Grandma. We tried picking numbers out of the phone book, making up numbers, and even 911. No one ever answered anymore, except for maybe an answering machine. We didn't know what else to do. Outside, we started hearing clicking and a scraping that sounded kind of soft and kind of far off. We peeked out of the window and saw someone hiking. He was walking really slow and with a big limp. He had one of those fancy backpacks and a walking stick, just walking down the middle of the road. It looked like he had twisted his ankle, and it was all bent, and he was walking with a big, uneven limp. The bottom of his foot wasn't even touching the ground. He was walking on his ankle, and it was ground down and bloody looking, but he kept walking like it didn't hurt, like he had forgotten how to hurt, or how to stop walking. We hid and watched him go by. He didn't even look right or left, just kept walking. We didn't move until he was too far away to see anymore. It was getting definitely past noon by now, and Dad still hadn't come back. We were scared, but didn't want to admit to each other that we knew something was wrong. Maybe Dad started forgetting and just kept driving. Maybe looters took his car. Maybe something else had happened. We didn't say anything, and just ran back home and locked the doors. It was early, but maybe if we went to sleep now, we would wake up tomorrow and Dad would be home. Mama always said breakfast was the most important meal of the day. Even when she got sick, she made sure we had a good breakfast and something different every day. We'd wake up on weekends to the smell of bacon, or maybe sweet rolls in the oven. Even during the week, Mama always made sure we at least had a bowl of cereal or oatmeal before school. We always had 4 to 5 kinds of cereal, so we could always have variation. Mama loved breakfast. Today I poured me and Joel some Cheerios in our bowls. We had that yesterday, and I wanted oatmeal or eggs, but we were out. We were out of almost everything, except a couple cans of soup and a couple boxes of cereal. We had cereal all day yesterday, because the only soup left was split pea and some tomato, which we both hated. After we ate it, it was Joel's turn for the dishes. We went to bed so early yesterday. We slept a long time and was still dark this morning. We tried to watch TV, but even though the power was on today, all that was on every channel was the repeating warning about staying inside and avoiding other people so you didn't get infected. Sometimes that doctor guy would come on and explain that it was a virus, and there was no medicine for it yet, but they were working on it. We had to get Mama in the ground today. The basement was starting to smell pretty bad. Dad said he would be back early today with more food and some tools for digging. I double-checked and he had circled today, Tuesday, on the calendar. I had crossed out Sunday the night he left, and Monday, yesterday, before I went to bed, to make sure I wouldn't forget. I would do it every night. It didn't matter if it was humid or frigid. I sat out on the porch of the house my grandfather built and poured 2 shots of whiskey. My eyes often stared into the woods that surrounded my house. I had done it for years, as I would sit in my favorite chair with my rifle leaned against the wall. I always found the sound of critters and bugs relaxing. It was around this time that I did my nightly ritual of pouring 2 shots of whiskey and placed them on the table my grandfather had built. I never got to meet him in person. My dad told me his old man was a strange fellow, but he was talented as I looked down to see his craftsmanship. A solid oak table that he engraved by hand. It had different words that a simple country boy couldn't pronounce, and symbols I had seen nowhere else. The way my dad talked about him before he himself passed, I would have liked him. I lifted the first glass and drank it. The shot of a stiff drink burned as it went down my throat, leaving that little tingle in my chest. I heard the crickets chirp and closed my eyes, soaking in the hot summer night until I could hear a faint growl at my feet. "What is it, May?" I asked as my eyes looked down at the red-nosed pit bull that lied at my feet. She was a good dog and often sat outside with me. Some fool had left her on the edge of my property 2 years back. The one thing that people in Coleman knew about me was that I could be a sucker for big, dumb dogs. My luck hasn't always been the best with them, though. They always end up disappearing in the woods and never coming back. My friend Eugene always told me that I needed to do something about those damn coyotes that keep getting my pets, but I knew the truth. It wasn't those scavengers that kept picking off my dogs. "You can smell them, can't you, girl?" I asked as I rubbed behind her ear. I stood up from my chair and grabbed my rifle, walking to the edge of the porch to see the tree line swaying as I could hear May whine behind me. I aimed the sights at the trees in the distance while waiting for those bastards to show themselves. It was a game of patience now. The sound of branches snapping echoed from the distance as I rested my finger on the trigger. "Come on out here, boys. This is private property, and I got my Winnie waiting for you," I yelled, hoping it was just another pair of dumb teens. They love to come around at night sometimes. It was a dumb legend around here that my family land is haunted. It started when my grandfather got torn apart in his own damn yard. The legend goes that his ghost wanders the yard, screaming and looking for his limbs that got torn off. It's bullcrap, honestly. I've never heard my ancestors screaming around the house. "Last chance to show yourself, or I will start shooting that way," I shouted my last warning. May began to bark aggressively, and I fired off a shot into the woods. The sound of a painful roar came soon after. I knew then it wasn't any dumb boys from town. I cocked my rifle again and gripped it tightly, waiting for them. It had been a while since they showed themselves. The 3 figures stepped out from the trees and stared at me with their piercing, hollow eyes. It had been almost 6 months since I had last seen the large, gray-skinned beasts lumbering into my yard. It was time to get inside as I turned to my dog. "All right, May, let's get inside," I called as I patted my leg. I stepped back and headed to the front door, opening it. I could hear the creatures as I turned to see them moving quickly to the 2 of us. The dog quickly shuffled inside. I quickly followed and closed the front door, keeping my rifle pointed at it as I waited for them to try to come inside. The sound of their growls echoed around the house as their footsteps circled the place my grandfather had built. May continued to bark loudly. The dog hated the damn things more than I did. The roar pierced my eardrums, and then it was silent. I placed my finger on the trigger and waited for their next move. The next noise left me with the feeling of dread. It wasn't another growl nor footsteps that I could hear. It was much worse. It was the wind, blowing inside my house. I turned and quickly ran to the kitchen and knew that tonight differed from the others. The back door was wide open, blowing the night's air into the house. Crap. The sound of floor creaked from within as I could hear the dog barking furiously now. The steps were heavy as I followed them and began walking around each room. The bastards were becoming more clever and were coming up with strategies instead of charging aimlessly as they had before. "May, where are you, girl?" I whispered while looking for my canine companion. My eyes scanned every corner as I tried to tread carefully and lightly through my home. The heavy creaks continued as I headed down the hall to the bedroom. That was May's safe place, where she would hide. I pushed open the door and paused. I could hear it as the footsteps rushed towards me. I quickly turned around and let another gunshot. As my ears began to ring, I felt something else. The warm feeling of my blood dripping down my arm as my eyes saw the teeth sink into my shoulder. It released me briefly before it overpowered me and pushed my body into the wall. The feeling of my ribs cracking as it pressed onto me tightly. It snarled as I felt its hot breath on my face. The beast screamed in agony as I saw the glimmer of a blade lunge into its back. I buckled as its paws released me, and I fell to the ground from the pain in my ribs. The monster wailed again as I could see the knife cut across its chest. "It's about damn time you showed up," I coughed. I looked to see a man, one that I had only ever seen in pictures and heard stories about. He stood in between me and the creature as he cut the creature one last time before it had lost its courage and fled. I struggled to stand as he began to walk towards the front room. "They're growing in the numbers," he said. "They're getting smarter too, Granddad," I said as I watched him walk onto the front porch, staring down the 4 beasts that stood frozen in my yard. He paused for a moment before looking at the shot of the whiskey and turning it to his lips. He wiped his face as the creatures began to turn and walk back into the woods. I looked their direction for a brief moment to watch the retreat, before turning back to the 2 empty glasses. He was gone again without saying a word to me. I walked over to the table, pouring another shot of whiskey. My grandfather had worked hard tonight and saved my ass. He deserved another offering. "Guess who called me today?" I said to Will. We were vegging on the couch, me laying with my legs across his lap. He was rubbing my calf absent-mindedly, engrossed in an episode of The Office we'd already seen at least 20 times. "Who?" he asked, taking a sip of his beer. "Sasha Watson." "Really?" He tore his eyes from the screen to give me a wry smile. "Haven't heard you talk about her in a while. What's she on now? Husband number 4? 3. Will grunted. "She asked if we could put her up later this week while she's in town. Something about visiting her estranged mother who's in assisted living." "She wants to stay with us? Just her?" I nodded. Whatever," Will said, turning back to the TV. "What can it hurt?" I pulled my legs away and sat up to stare at my husband. "What? Are you serious?" "I don't see why not." "Will, what about your project deadline? Won't you be busy? If it's too much of a hassle for you." "Come on now. Don't pin it on me. Why don't you just say yes? You'll rack up some good karma. Besides, it would be good for you to have a friend around for a while. You've been self-isolating again." "Okay," I said, getting up. "I'm not having this conversation right now." Will shrugged. "Suit yourself. I think you should tell her yes, though." I rolled my eyes, picked up a book from the coffee table, and went to go read in bed. I was annoyed and a little hurt, but I guess at my core I knew Will was right. By the time I was falling asleep, I had mostly talked myself into helping Sasha out. I texted Sasha the next day. She was ecstatic, insisting it would be just like when we were roommates. I was dreading her visit, It wasn't that I hated Sasha, not by any means, but we hadn't so much as talked in years. Plus, she had a history of coming on too strongly to married men, and I wasn't thrilled at the thought of her flirting with Will. Sasha arrived on Thursday with a stuffed suitcase and the inviting smile I remembered from our college days. She dropped the suitcase when I opened the door and ran to embrace me tightly. "Oh my God, it's so good to see you, Nell. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. I should have stayed in touch." "It's no big deal, Sash," I said, awkwardly patting her on the back. "I could have tried a little harder too." Sasha pulled away to look at me. "No, I totally get it. You have a busy life. I think we all do at this point." She glanced over my shoulder into the house. "Is hubby here? I can't wait to meet him." "He'll be home around 6. Come on in. I'll show you your room." Sasha and I spent a good while catching up over large glasses of Moscato. She went on about her third husband, how much she loved him, and how she thought he really would be the one she would spend the rest of her life with. She also mentioned multiple times how jealous she was of my relationship with Will, despite knowing next to nothing about us. Needless to say, this made me uncomfortable. Later, she insisted on helping with dinner despite my protests. She carried on, laughing and reminiscing about old times while I smiled and nodded. I was already exhausted and had 2 more days of this. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. When Will came home, Sasha's enthusiasm only increased. Will had heard my many stories about Sasha, her numerous boyfriends, the failed marriages, the multiple times she was the other woman, but they'd never met. Sasha lavished Will with attention. Halfway through dinner, I'd lost my appetite and was knee-deep in regret. "You really caught a cute one, Nell," Sasha said, dabbing at her ruby-painted lips with a napkin. "My Jeremy isn't nearly as cute as you, but what he lacks in looks, he makes up for in the bedroom." She winked at Will. I almost opened my mouth to tell Sasha off, but Will raised an eyebrow at me, and I sighed. "Will is a great guy," I said, moving my fork around my plate listlessly. "Smart, sweet, and yeah, I guess he's pretty cute." Will and Sasha laughed, and conversation resumed. I did my best to grin and bear it, and at the very least the two seemed to have an enjoyable night. Friday was much the same. I spent some quality one-on-one time with Sasha, going out to our old favorite restaurant for lunch and chatting over drinks. I don't know if it was the wine or just familiarity, but I actually began to enjoy myself a little. Trust me, I never forgot how manipulative Sasha could be, or how easily she could spin the truth. But she was undeniably kind of fun to be around. My comfort around her wouldn't last long, however. During after-dinner drinks that night, I began to notice something strange. Will was talking to Sasha less. He was asking fewer questions, not engaging nearly as much, and I caught him throwing odd glances her way. Something in his face read mistrust. All the same, Sasha chatted her way through the evening amiably, her ever bubbly self. As we went off to bed for the night, I couldn't help but notice that Will's good night to Sasha was cold, almost scornful. In the morning, Will kissed me on the forehead as usual before running out the door to the office. The big project he had due next week unfortunately meant that Saturday was another work day for him. I woke up a bit later to find a piece of paper next to my pillow. Blearily, I sat up and read the note scrawled therein. "We need to talk later. Make sure you're not around Sasha." The note had me a little on edge, as Sasha and I drank our coffee alongside a light breakfast. She wasn't acting unusual in any way, so I wasn't sure exactly what bomb Will was going to drop on me. After we ate, Sasha headed out to visit her mom, and I took the opportunity to call Will. "Hey, babe," he said upon answering. "Hey yourself. What was with the note? Did you give Sasha my phone number?" I sat down at the kitchen table and took a sip of lukewarm coffee. "No? Why would I?" "I don't know, but she got it somehow." "Weird? She's been texting you or something?" "Yeah, it started yesterday. It started off normal, thanking me for letting her stay, etc., but it got weird. She began implying that there was some kind of, sexual agreement between us." "What?" I hissed. "Are you serious?" "Yeah. and they've just been getting worse. I can't believe her. After we put her up, this is I can't believe it. I'll show you tonight. I think it would be best if we confront her. Okay, I sniffled. We'll get it sorted out, Will soothed. Love you now. Love you too. I tried to keep my cool until Will got home. When Sasha returned from her visit, I made up excuses to leave her on her own. I went to Will's home office and shut myself in, spending at least an hour scouring Sasha's Facebook page for signs that she was cracking. When Will got home, I heard him brush off Sasha's greeting. He came into the office and shut the door behind him. She's escalating the messages, he said. His face was pale, and seeing him appear as so at odds made my skin prickle. She started to suggest some pretty dark stuff now. I think we should ask her to leave. Let me see. I want to know exactly what's being said. Will unlocked his phone and handed it to me. His jaw was clenched tight as he watched me pull up the messages. I read through them with growing horror and disgust. Meet me in the basement after dinner. I've been waiting for so long. I have something far tastier for you than Nell's dry roast. I know you don't really love Nell. Let's leave together. Tonight. I could get something to poison her dinner, but a knife would be faster. I love you, Will. I want to be with you forever, whatever the cost. I finished reading, my mouth hanging open while tears blurred my vision. Are we in trouble, Will? No, Will assured me, though he avoided my eyes as he said it. She's probably not dangerous. Let's just go ask her about it. Taking a deep breath, I followed Will to the living room. Sasha wasn't there. We heard a clanking from the kitchen and turned to find Sasha standing with a knife in her hand. She was smiling. Hey, I hope you don't mind. Thought I'd start dinner while you two were busy. She went to the counter where a peeled onion was sitting on a cutting board. She started dicing, and Will and I exchanged glances. Sash, we need to talk, I began. Would you mind putting down the knife? Sasha did as I asked and gave me a puzzled look. What's up? It's the text messages, Will said, crossing his arms. They need to stop immediately or we're going to have to ask you to leave. That or we're calling the cops. Sasha's eyes widened. I don't know what you're talking about. She looked at me. What text messages, Nell? Don't play dumb, Sasha, I replied coldly. I read them all. I know what you've been saying, what you're planning. I don't... No. Let's not draw it out. Show her, Will. Will brought up the messages and handed the phone over to Sasha. She nervously took it and read. Good Lord, she mumbled. Guys, I didn't write these. That's not my number. What? Will asked. But the first message. You thanked me for letting you stay over. Why are you denying this, Sasha? I know about your history. I know you were sleeping with Bobby Crichton while he was dating Maria. You kind of set a precedent for yourself, don't you think? I expected Sasha to defend herself further. Instead, her eyes fell to the phone still in her hand. You guys should see this. Will took the phone and I read it over his shoulder. Icy fingers danced down my spine. The other one is cute, but I want you all to myself. And I always get my way. I need to be with you tonight, Will. Don't make me wait, or I'll kill them both. Oh my God, I said. Who? Nell, Will said, gripping my shoulder and staring just beyond the kitchen. Have we checked the basement lately? No, I whispered in response, dread creeping into my brain like an unwelcome worm. Why would we need to? The clicking of the doorknob turning startled us all, and we watched as the basement door swung open. A thin woman, wearing a torn, dirty red cocktail dress emerged, hunched over and staring intensely at the three of us. Her lips were cracked and smeared with blood. I've waited long enough, Will, she said, her voice dry and strained. We're going to be together now. She smiled grotesquely. In one hand she held a cell phone, and in the other, a ball-peen hammer. Monica? What the hell are you doing? Will demanded, his eyes wide with horror. What the hell are you doing in my house? You said I could stay any time, Will. You promised. Are you taking back your promise, Will? Her eyes glistened, and tears ran down her dirt-smeared cheeks. Monica. She was Will's manager. I was completely at a loss as I watched this woman I had known for 3 years twitch like a feral animal. Her typically composed hair was a rat's nest, and her bare feet were filthy. She brought with her a pungent smell of piss mixed with standing water. Will, do something, I begged, holding onto his elbow tightly. Monica, it's okay. We can figure this out. Just wait 1 second. Don't do anything rash, please. But it was clear that anger and hurt had already poisoned her mind. She twisted her mouth into a snarl and suddenly rushed at me, hammer raised high above her head. I didn't have enough time to react rationally, and only cowered with my eyes squeezed shut, hoping that Will would protect me. Schlick. I opened my eyes to find that Sasha had picked up the kitchen knife and stabbed Monica in the rib cage. She withdrew the knife quickly and raised her arm to strike again. Monica howled with pain and dropped the hammer. She twisted out of the way of Sasha's next attack and scrambled back, clutching her wound. Will dived for the hammer, and Monica's eyes darted between the three of us, weighing the situation. Her eyes fell on me last, narrowed and hateful. There was a darkness in them that I'd never seen before. I staggered back, afraid she might dart at me, but instead she twitched away and bolted for the front door, her ragged red dress fluttering behind her. She disappeared into the night, leaving us utterly stunned. After the police interviewed us and took pictures of the basement, they gave us the bad news that Monica was nowhere to be found. Her apartment was vacant, and she'd somehow covered her tracks well enough to avoid detection from police dogs. Apparently, her apartment contained some evidence of her growing obsession with my husband, photos that were taken without Will's knowledge, personal information about both of us, and even a detailed weekly schedule of Will's day-to-day. Will helped us put together the pieces of Monica's final mental break. She had told Will and his co-workers that she was going to take a quick impromptu vacation that Thursday. The reality was that she had become consumed by jealousy when Will mentioned that we were having a house guest. Will thought her pouting response that he never invited over was odd, but brushed it aside with an empty promise that she could come over anytime she liked. She'd taken him at his word, quite literally. Monica had somehow gotten into the house and holed up in our unfinished basement. Down there, the police found a phone charger, a bucket of excrement, a few dirty personal effects, and a crude table setting put together with old furniture and some items she'd squirreled away while everyone was gone or asleep. It was like some seriously twisted version of Lady and the Tramp. We apologized profusely to Sasha, but she laughed it off gracefully, despite the trauma of the night. She and Will are asleep now somehow. I've been writing this all night because even with the cops keeping watch, how the hell am I supposed to go to sleep knowing that Monica is still out there? Especially after I'd seen that cold, unfathomable evil in her eyes. It's Sasha's last night visiting, and I'll admit it's comforting to have her leave. She actually invited us to Florida to stay with her and her new husband for as long as we wanted. Sasha, who I begrudgingly let stay in our home, who I hadn't talked to in so long, and who I accused of such terrible things. Sasha, who stabbed a deranged would-be murderer in my defense. Yeah, you bet your ass we're going to Florida tomorrow. Besides, I think Sasha and I have some more catching up to do. Thank you for making it this far. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe if you like my content. If you'd like to follow me and want to be involved in what I'm doing / talk to me, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. If you'd like an offline experience, check out the podcast, The Midnight Podcast. And if you're at all inclined, I've got some merch out there to be purchased if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.